Good evening. Thank you for joining us for the Chief's meet availability for September 28th, 2021. Chief, the floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Today was a very productive day with the Board of Police Commissioners. They heard our implementation plan following the 3 after action reports and the advisory committee for the Board of Police Commissioners as to a path forward that identified some added resources, as well as explaining how the organization would adapt its training and other existing programming to accomplish the recommendations that were presented. The department, I'm proud of the work of our men and women who in their leadership, as well as with a number of community members that stepped forward to work with us and to see meaningful reforms that would be laid out in an implementation plan that I now look forward to providing the City Council with budget proposals as part of our upcoming budget document, as well as meeting and discussing with them the recommendations that we've came forward with and how we see that improving policing across this city as we strive to continue to demonstrate to the world that this is the 21st century policing organization. So with that, I'll be happy to take questions or comments from people. Okay, anybody out there?
All right, Kevin Rector. We have Kevin Rector. He's going to ask his first question, sir.
Hi, sir. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Yesterday, a regular cop watcher and complaint filer, William Good, was arrested in Hollywood. A lot of folks have suggested online and elsewhere that he was being retaliated against for his work cop watching. We were told that there were no witnesses to the alleged threat that he had made against his accuser, and yet he was charged with a felony seemingly on the spot. And so I'm wondering if you are aware, if you can talk through some of the circumstances that led to the decision making in charging him as he was, and then if you can speak to whether or not you'll be releasing body camera footage in this case.
Okay, so Kevin, you earlier today sent me an email, as well as Captain Spell, advising you're going to make a Public Records Act request, and also asking, I believe, as I recall, and also whether we would be releasing as part of our policy of releasing critical instances to on that arrest. I today, just a few moments ago, did a very high-level review of the facts and circumstances leading up to this man's arrest. And what I've observed was officers that responded to a radio call of an individual suspect that was alleged to be waving or holding a knife in a location on a public street in Hollywood. They responded, detained an individual matching that description, and during that detention, another individual, I believe identified as Mr. Good, arrived, and the individual who we had detained pointed out Mr. Good and alleged that he had threatened to burn down the homeless person's tent, the person we had and had temporarily detained. The officers then approached Mr. Good, and he was detained. And then over a series of a number of minutes of investigative efforts by the uniform officers there, as well as the supervisor, attempted to untangle that and determine what had occurred. As the investigation continued, eventually, I believe Mr. Good was transported from the scene and was interviewed by detectives, and ultimately a decision was made to arrest him for 422 of the Penal Code for terrorist threats. The basis of that is that the initial individual we detained, officers did observe that he had in his possession a knife. That knife, however, he immediately complied with the officer's directions to cooperate and drop the item. And he was cooperative through the entire encounter with the officers. The officers also learned that he had not threatened anyone with that item, and that he was experiencing a bit of a crisis by his account, and had been throwing some items in the street about the area of which he's experiencing homelessness. And when Mr. Good came by and threatened to burn his tent down, and they had a verbal altercation, if you will, between the two of them. Our officers attempted to identify witnesses on scene for both sides. I listened to some body-worn video tapes of exploring on both instances whether witnesses existed for either side of what occurred. And additionally, the officers received from the individual we initially detained a private person's arrest form for the criminal threat. Moving forward, he was booked, Mr. Good, and later bailed out, I understand, last night. And I also understand he's made a number of accusations regarding the officer's actions and the proprietary nature of his of that arrest, and also are in a relationship to him making frequent complaints or complaints against police misconduct, and that was a motivating factor. At this point, what I've observed is officers' efforts to understand what happened in this altercation between two individuals, in which one accused the other one of threatening to burn down his tent. In Los Angeles, in Hollywood, we have seen tents that have been set on fire because of disputes involving people experiencing homelessness. So that is a reality that does occur and has occurred and has encountered not just a loss of property, but injuries and deaths to persons experiencing homelessness. The investigation will continue. Anyone with information that may have seen this encounter and can provide information to the department, we're still in the investigative phase of this. This entire matter will be brought before the district attorney's office for consideration and/or city attorney's office for any filing or prosecution. So at this point, I don't intend to release the video. I do, or the videos, the body worn. Officers encounter 14,000 instances a day in which we take video snippets of instances. And while we do have a critical incident video release policy involving categorical uses of force and other significant events that draw significant public interest, at this point, I don't believe that it's in the public's interest on this arrest, because Mr. Good may dispute it, that in of itself forms the basis to release the video at this juncture.
Okay, Christy Fajardo, you're up next.
Hi, Chief Moore. This is Christy Fajardo with Fox 11. I have two questions for you. The first is I wanted to get your response to the Police Commission President's statements this morning regarding unvaccinated officers who are seeking medical and religious exemptions. And I also wanted to know if you shared his sentiments.
Well, I think that Commissioner President Briggs used the word dubious, which in understanding that phrase, that it's doubtful, causes him to question their validity. There are some 2,660 individuals we understand that filed a notice of intent to apply for a sincerely held religious belief, and then another 300 plus to file a medical exemption. I think the most appropriate thing for me to do as a general manager of this department is not to prejudge those requests. If I uniformly dismiss them as dubious or as without any basis or without any merit, without having given the employees the opportunity to fulfill their responsibilities of articulating and demonstrating why they have a sincerely held religious belief or a medical exemption, then I think I've done an injustice to everyone. I do understand the Commission President's frustration, as well as his concerns that the actions of these officers by failing or refusing to take a vaccine not only jeopardizes themselves and their partner and their families, but by extension also their interactions with the public. My commitment is to ensure that we follow the protocols that the City Council, with the Mayor's concurrence, has laid out to require vaccinations of all. Up to this point, I've attempted to model the behavior of what I'm asking every employee of this organization to do, which is take the vaccine. I believe it saves their lives. I follow the science, not the rhetoric and the misinformation. And I believe that it's critical that they do the same. And so far, it's been a voluntary basis, but that is now changing with not only the requirement that they identify their vaccination status, but a vaccine requirement as a means of them being a member of this organization. There are, though, however, the framework has been established to establish 2 exemptions. And again, it is premature and would be ill-advised for me to prejudge any of those exemptions requests in that I've not seen anyone submit one as yet.
And I also had a question that's unrelated to this topic, and I'm asking this of various law enforcement agencies. Does the LAPD require your command staff and people in media relations to sign non-disclosure agreements?
Non-disclosure agreements about what?
About what is about operations or NDAs of any sort?
Oh, okay. So as a matter of department policy, there is a confidentiality that all employees are obligated to. Law enforcement in this profession becomes aware of information, many times law enforcement sensitive, confidential, and privileged, that the individual who possesses that information has the responsibility of keeping that confidential, not publishing or providing to the media or outside individuals outside their role, of passing that information along. So they have overall, every employee of this organization has, if you will, a non-disclosure agreement, in that the obligation to, again, keep confidential, law enforcement sensitive, and privileged information that that if that were released, could violate the privacy rights of other individuals.
Is that outlined in policy, or do they actually sign NDAs?
It's outlined in policy, and I believe that we have, for instance, on our criminal justice information systems, where we access criminal justice databases, that there are confidentiality or non-disclosure admonishments there, and they're actually subject to not only violation of department policy, but committing criminal acts for unlawful disclosure of such information.
But they don't sign anything, it's just outlined, so it's understood.
No, it's more than understood. It is part of department policy, and there are signatures required for instance, I give an example off the top of my head. We can research more, Christy, for more specifics. I just don't want to overstate something, but I know, for instance, that on an annual or semi-annual basis, every member of this organization who has access or who accesses criminal justice information systems has to sign a understanding of their responsibilities and restrictions as to the use of that information, its access, and its disclosure, which by extension is a non-disclosure agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Okay. Well, thank you all. Oh, Kevin's got his hand up.
Kevin, go ahead.
I was waiting for other people, but here I am. Do you have any of the numbers that you usually provide in your chief's report to the commission? I know you weren't able to get before them today.
Yeah.
Numbers on new COVID cases, total sworn, total civilian, et cetera.
Yes, and I don't know if this was covered. I know there was not a chief's report as an agenda item today, and I don't know if the president or anyone within Assistant Chief Choi was sitting in for me during the closed session. But this morning, I attended the funeral services and spoke for a fallen active member of the organization who died due to non-COVID related illness, and was there at the service in graveside, which preempted me from attending and providing a chief's report as I would each week. I will go into that now, just particularly for your interest on the COVID update. As of the 27th of September, we have now 3,142 of our members that overall that have tested positive for COVID. That's an increase of 16 from last week. Our at-home numbers, those that are at home recovering from COVID, are 118. That's a reduction of 2. And we've had 16 additional people now return to work. That now stands at 3,044 of those impacted by COVID have now returned and are back at work. We have seen a reduction in the number of personnel that have been hospitalized. We now stand at a total of 3 individuals. However, on this past Sunday, one of our employees officers that had been hospitalized due to a COVID exposure that occurred away from the work site passed away, and we lost him. Frank Petita, a professional, 39-year-old a father of two, husband, and a devoted police officer who had been away from the work site due to a recovery from an earlier injury that he experienced on the job. Became infected with COVID and lost his battle in overcoming that pandemic this past Sunday night. I grieve for his loss, and as well as the command in the harbor area that where he worked for a number of years, and to his family, we offer our deepest condolences. As to vaccination numbers, we have a total of 12,000, and I'm pulling this from a number of 12,152 department employees that are actually part of our payroll and deployed. From that number, 7,380 are now fully vaccinated. That comes out to just under 61%, 60.74% is that number. Additionally, we continue to work with a couple thousand individuals that have not yet declared their vaccination status. And we are now reaching out to each one and various commands across the city. And the city has issued guidance that as of October 19th, every city employee must declare their vaccination status, whether they are or are not vaccinated for the COVID-19 pandemic, or be subject to disciplinary action. I anticipate that our numbers will have not yet stated their vaccination status will reduce significantly in the coming days as we reach out and talk with each employee. Each employee is required as part of that request is to provide proof of their vaccination by presenting a vaccination card identifying the information. All that, of course, is kept very confidential, recognizing the sensitivity of personal medical history information. But the department is on that path. So I do expect the 61% to increase in the coming days and weeks as we go and strive to have our entire organization fully protected from this deadly pandemic.
Sir, and then I have a question from David Singer. He's saying in New York, there was a big increase in vaccinations among health workers as a mandate deadline grew close. Is the chief optimistic the same will be the case with LAPD?
I am very optimistic. This last week, we vaccinated an additional 50 of our employees, which is a reduction from the week before. The week before, I think we had more than 300 additional employees that were vaccinated. But I believe that the vaccine is widely available in all three doses, whether it be Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, or Pfizer. And I believe that these approaching deadlines and expectations for access to businesses and activities requiring a vaccination card, all this will continue to motivate our employees beyond the obvious health benefits and protections that this vaccine provides.
Chief, this is Kevin Rector. My condolences for the loss of your officer. Can you spell his name for me, first and last?
Yeah, P-A-T. Sorry, I'm sorry. Go ahead. P-A-R-T-I-D-A. Frank is his first name. Partida.
Thank you, and condolences again.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you all.
I believe that would be the 11th member of LAPD to have passed away in relation to COVID-19. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.